Benvenuti a questo speciale del podcast del Ghiaccio
Molto
del
speciale.
Fuoco, molto speciale. Io sono Chiara e con me ci sono Beatrice, Domenico e Filippo. Ciao a tutti ragazzi.
Ciao.
Ciao raga.
Ciao ragazzi.
Allora, speciale che potete già vedere dal titolo che uff,
Bello ricco.
molto ricco.
Raga,
Diciamo
troverete un po' di cose, insomma, cioè nel senso che...
Noi abbiamo
Vabbè,
già finito di parlare con i nostri due specialissimi ospiti. Vabbè, Bea, chi sono i nostri specialissimi ospiti?
Allora, come potete vedere ovviamente dal titolo, sono Elio García e Linda Antonsson che hanno scritto insieme hanno collaborato con George Martin alla scrittura del Mondo del Ghiaccio del Fuoco e anche in generale sono stati e in qualche misura continuano a essere suoi consulenti per la coerenza, la loro, eccetera. Quindi sono assolutamente dei grossi nomi nel fandom, forse i più grossi possiamo dire.
dopo Martin sicuramente il più grosso,
Sì.
insomma.
E ovviamente sono i fondatori di Westeros.org, che è la più grossa e più antica community internazionale riguardo a Song of Ice and Fire.
Esatto.
È stata una bella chiacchierata, raga. Adesso poi Domenico
Come al
magari
solito non
dice...
siamo stati laconici.
No.
No, neanche loro però, neanche loro.
No, neanche loro. Loro avevano molta voglia di parlare, di raccontare
Sì, esatto.
cose. Hanno risposto alle nostre domande, ci hanno fatto loro delle domande, cosa molto interessante. Una conversazione leggera, devo dire, però c'è anche della ciccia, raga.
Sì,
Sono
mamma.
delle cose
Sì.
che vengono fuori, insomma.
Tante cose.
E a un paio di domande anche abbastanza precise, tra cui una mia, hanno risposto in maniera abbastanza netta, onestamente, meglio di come mi aspettavo che rispondessero. Quindi,
Sì.
insomma, veramente un video da guardare, tanto è sottotitolato, quindi non avete scuse da questo punto di
Esatto,
vista.
mettetevi comodi davanti alla TV, ci mettete sulla TV grande.
Esatto,
Ascoltate
così i
il mio inglese
sottotitoli sono grandi.
Esatto.
Comunque noi non siamo stati soli.
Esatto.
Assolutamente.
Esatto, tra l'altro, raga, vedrete, cioè, è sembrato più che giusto, data l'occasione, come dire, chiedere la partecipazione anche del resto della community. E infatti vedrete durante la chiamata queste comparsate, questi cameo, chiamiamoli così, di Matteo Barbagallo, di Eghe Saia della Cittadella, di Lucio Vittorio del Mondo, di Stannerman, e ultima ma non ultima anche di Laura, cioè della Madre dei Draghi. Noi li ringraziamo, vi ringraziamo tantissimo. Esatto, cioè ultima ma non ultima perché è ultima nel video.
Sì, perché
vi
era
ringraziamo.
la domanda più...
Era la domanda più succosa che andava messa in
quindi
fondo.
l'abbiamo tenuta come ultima portata.
Esatto, no, anche perché è piaciuta tantissimo la domanda.
Sì.
Penso sia stata quella tra le più belle. Sì.
Sì, ma loro sono
E
stati
quindi-
proprio contenti di rispondere in generale a tutti, c'è da dire. Poi, appunto, quelle Laura si prestava bene a tutta una serie di ragionamenti, però appunto ora vedrete il video e capirete.
Esatto,
Che
quindi
quelle Laura...
ragazzi, anche a voi
Vi ringraziamo
grazie
moltissimo
mille per la
perché sono stati-
partecipazione.
Esatto.
Grazie per la partecipazione a tutti quanti. Nei ringraziamenti noi vogliamo includere ovviamente i nostri grandissimi, carissimi Patreon che sempre ci sostengono e sempre credono in noi. Sono stati i primi che hanno saputo di questo nostro traguardo e saranno sicuramente gli ultimi a essere ringraziati qua. Quindi
E hanno
noi
contribuito ad alcune delle domande che abbiamo fatto.
ovviamente hanno contribuito Lord and Ladies Giando e Chiara B, abbiamo le Ladies Amata, Cristina, Marta, Maura, Saia, Virginia, la Dama Grigia, Lorna Dane e l'altra Virginia, poi abbiamo Ser Filippo, Ser Giovanni e Ser Marco B, abbiamo Emanuela, Francesca, Val, Chiara B, Chiara _17 e la nuova nostra Patreon Spilling Books, benvenuta. Poi abbiamo Gabriele, Andrea e Francesco. Grazie mille ragazzi per il vostro... Grazie mille
ragazzi.
Godetevi il video.
Molti spunti
Buona
vengono da
visione.
loro,
Sì.
Buona
Sì,
visione.
esatto.
Buona visione,
Godetevi il
ragazzi.
video, ragazzi. Buona visione. Ciao.
Buona visione, ciao.
Ciao, raga.
anything you
But
want to
I
know.
haven't introduced my colleagues. So you can see the
Yes.
names: Chiara, Domenico, and Filippo.
Hello, nice to meet
Hello.
you.
Nice to
Nice
Nice
meet
to
to
you.
meet
meet you as well.
Yeah,
Which parts of Italy? Are you all from different parts of Italy or
Yes.
different cities?
Different parts of it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
different.
North and south.
My father-in-law just returned from Italy yesterday. He loves Italy. He visits it every year, and he was at Lago Maggiore for about last week or so. So and I went over to Switzerland for a little bit, but
It's in Lombardy where I and Filippo live, so we know it.
yeah, I mean, I reminded him, but I lived in Vicenza for a couple of years when I was very young. My father was in the army, so we were stationed at Camp Ederly.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, me and Domenico are from the deep south, so
Okay.
there's a difference also in our accents, different accents. So,
The
yeah.
Dornish part of
Sicily
Italy.
or Naples or
Domenico
I
is
live near Naples. I was born in Caserta in south.
Okay.
It's the same region of Naples, but
Yes.
not so near.
Yeah, and I was born and raised in Sicily, down south. So yeah,
Okay, awesome.
different part of the world. We met up through Facebook, and then we decided to start this crazy thing called the podcast.
Awesome. That's
5
one of the
years
great things
ago.
about the internet. Yeah,
Yeah,
allowing
it's
people
great.
to get,
Yeah.
And we're also very grateful for Martin to have given us this masterpiece, so that we can meet up every week
yeah.
and discuss something. Yeah,
You're still discussing every week a regular schedule of
yeah,
Yeah.
awesome.
Every week we do a POV analysis. Or
Okay.
every week or so we have some kind of special videos, but in the end,
was
our
your
main
latest?
series is the POV analysis.
What was your latest video? Who were you? Which
Our
character
latest
were you?
video was on the rich and the magic of the land. We discussed some Goth the Green Hand magic and all of the descendants. Domenico is very fond of this region. These are
I love it. I love the race.
exactly.
Yes,
It's a
I'm
Tyler
a big
man
fan,
through and through. It's also we're very different because the podcast is very rich, and we are each of us is an expert. Dare I say an expert?
Maybe.
Different regions of Westeros.
Yes,
Maybe.
sure.
I'm very fond of the Starks and the North. Domenico for the rich. Bea is loves Dorne and the
And Sansa
Martells.
Stark.
And yeah, and Filippo, of course, is our tallyman and
Malister.
A riverman.
a riverman. Yes.
And as for the POV analysis, we're around the middle of A Storm of Swords, like the nuptials between Sansa and Tyrion. We've done it a couple weeks ago, I think.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds a good pace. I'm glad that people are still interested in discussing at that level. And I mean, we used to be there was the old Ice and Fire podcast crew, but they were doing the same thing years ago, but they kind of stopped. They kind of reached the end and said, well, we're just going to wait, I guess. It's nice also to see people focused on the books and like the TV show is a sort of another thing and not just a TV show. There's so many TV show podcasts. It's nice to talk to book fans.
Yeah. We also cover the TV shows because people want to see them. So of course we do, but we prefer to talk about the
strategy. It's a marketing strategy. We need visual to keep up our work. We fortunately this year we scheduled every single live on YouTube on time. So we know when and where we're gonna discuss the episodes, and that's fantastic because last year was complete disaster.
2 years ago, actually, when I went to the premiere and I met you.
Yeah, yes, that's right.
It was great, and then it was all madness.
That was fun.
Madness of the yeah. Are you planning on doing like each episode's review like you did the last time with Elio?
Yeah, we're planning to do videos about each episode, kind of not review, but it's kind of commenting. As we said in the first season, we kind of felt it's a little odd to kind of critique.
Review
We're
it.
not involved, but to critique it the same way we did Game of Thrones, because we're not involved in the Song of Ice and Fire in the same way. But since this kind of came out of the world of Ice and Fire, it's a book that we co-wrote. It feels like we'll comment and so on, but we're not really going to write reviews or critiques per se. Although you'll probably guess what bits we like, what bits we don't like, just from how we discuss it.
Yeah, I remember from the first season that you did something like that.
Yeah,
it was great to read it.
Yeah. It was great also to watch it. Yesterday I was rewatching your overview of the first season. Was great. All the things you discussed, like the character changed and what you like, what you didn't like. And my question for today, just to kickstart all of this interview, is what do you think of the trailer season 2, the recent trailer? What do you like? What you didn't like?
What's your opinion?
You know, the first thing is that before the final trailer, we had the black and the green trailers, which was a kind of an interesting concept. I'll just start stepping onto landmines right off. I'm not a big fan of the internet talk about blacks and greens and which side people are on and how crazy it actually has gotten in some circles. Some people are really intense about it, and I have to keep kind of reminding, at the end of the day, I mean, no one can say I don't love this world, that I'm not immersed in it, but it's just a TV show at the end. So I found it's natural for HBO to lean into that as part of its marketing, but I'm really concerned it's kind of, for some segment of the fandom online, it's very unhealthy to become so focused on this conflict. But as to the final trailer, I thought it was great. I thought lots of hints, lots of interesting details, lots of heraldry. I adore the heraldry. I love seeing the Crown Lands heraldry. I made a post kind of pointing out, here's the Rosbys, and so that's fantastic. I know George asked Ryan Condal about it, and asked him to please put the heraldry back in the pageantry, and he has really done that. They've really done a great job of that. So I love that. I look forward to it. I mean, they've obviously hinted at some of the big events. I don't know how spoilery, if we assume your audience is mostly familiar with Fire and Blood, but some big battles ahead. Let's put it that way.
The heraldry is indeed one of the best things in House of the Dragon for me too. It's so colorful. Just how George Martin intended it to be. Yeah, I think Filippo has a question about this.
Yes. I love the fact that the heraldry arrived in the TV show, because in Game of Thrones we saw very little of it. Only the greater houses. And only in the first episode of House of the Dragon, at the tourney, we saw a lot of lesser houses, and it was, for me, wonderful. I'm a big fan of House Mallister, and to see the Mallister Knight, and also the fact that they talk about these houses, their politics, their role in the reign. It's wonderful, because it's similar to what George wrote.
Yes,
to its word.
Yes, I read that George. I said he really wanted it back. I think the TV show, the Game of Thrones, kind of leaned into the people can't keep track of all these houses, so we're just going to have all the bannermen just start using their banner lords' arms. Yeah. So in the first season, even the Tourney of the Hand, you saw a little bit of arms, a little bit here and there, but mostly not at all. And it was very sad. So it was great that they both the color of the heraldry, the fact that you're seeing these other houses. I mean, from the trailers we've seen that the Brackens and Blackwoods are going to be getting at least a feature in an episode or two. So we're going to learn, see that conflict, I guess. It's just great. I think it gives a richer world for people to kind of believe in, rather than imagining Westeros as this small kingdom where basically there's just 7 big houses. And was there any Dornish house besides the Martells and the whole of? Well, I mean, okay, Arthur Dayne.
No.
Shows up in one episode in a flashback, but you don't really hear about him. You don't know anything about him. Yeah. And that's pretty much it. So basically Dorne are the Martells and this little house called Dane somewhere. And the Reach, the Hightowers, I guess Gerald Hightower shows up, maybe. I was even named. It was very strange.
Maybe the tower.
Yeah, I love this. They really.
But we hadn't seen the Tower Sigil in Game of Thrones, if I'm right.
Which one?
We didn't see them. We didn't see the Tower Sigil.
No. This is the first time we did it on House of Dragon. I mean, the Valorians didn't show up in Game of Thrones at all. I mean, I guess you had the Freys. The Freys were like the other house, basically, and everyone else is, a big house. So it was nice. It's nice that they've actually done it, and I think I can understand why they did it. That they were concerned people wouldn't keep track, but I think audiences are much more capable of keeping track, especially when they have such strong visual design to them. They have the colors. They actually wear their sigils, which is a thing that mostly doesn't happen as time went on. I think people will be able to keep track just fine.
Yeah. In the latest season of Game of Thrones, they dulled the color and they sucked all the color out of everything colorful in George Martin. And this kind of powerful imagery reminds me a lot of A Clash of Kings, because we see in that book colors and banners and beautiful, beautiful scenery. And I think Ryan took a lot of inspiration from the book. I can see some scenes reenacted in the trailer, like the bread riot in King's Landing, and well done. That's all I can say. Well done. Yeah.
It has been done in season 1 too.
Yeah.
Like the hunt in episode 3 is probably taken from a Game of Thrones, I think. Inspired by Game of Thrones, sort of.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll see something more of the Lord of the Vale during the season that can remind us of Sansa's voyage to the Vale. What do you think?
Yeah, I certainly think we'll see elements of that. I mean, another one that struck me, and I'll bring up, but I mean, I discussed it with Ryan. I loved in the first season how he depicted the relationship between Kristen Cole and Rhaenyra, and how his sort of anguish over kind of breaking his vows. And he actually said, it reminded me a lot of Eris Oakheart. And he said, yeah, he definitely saw, there was definitely some Eris Oakheart in Kristen Cole. There were definitely elements of that character from A Feast for Crows that he was kind of using and kind of showing, as we know from House Jourdain, with the dragon biting its own tail. Time is a wheel; it kind of goes in circles, and there are elements of all of George's stories kind of compressed and kind of blended together and mashed up in the Dance of the Dragons.
Yeah. So we kind of derailed a bit from the order we gave them at the beginning, because you have to know we send them all the questions you send us, and I'm sorry, this was my fault, but the first question actually that Matteo sent us, we all know who Matteo is. He was a guest in our channel a couple of times. It was about the cookbook that was published this year about the cuisine in A Song of Ice and Fire, or better yet, of Game of Thrones, and translated into our world recipe. And he sent us a video. I'm gonna show the video. Maybe let's see if we can answer his question.
Hello, podcast del Ghiaccio del Fuoco, and hello, Elio. I hope you guys are getting ready for season 2 of House of the Dragon. It's gonna be fantastic. Now, question with regards to the cookbook. Elio, after having read it, what do you think are the recipes that best capture the essence of Westeros and Essos? And how do you think Chelsea has balanced this historical accuracy, although fictitious or fictional, with contemporary cooking? Thank you so much for the answer. Bye, guys.
Wow.
Great question from Matteo. You may have seen Linda kind of sneaking by under. She's maybe going to be popping back in a little bit. She's kind of getting herself ready. But okay, on the question of cookbook, I think we really like from a new cookbook. Now we have to make
the new cookbook, yes,
brand new cookbook. Chelsea. At first, I just we did a review of it, kind of discussing it on our website, and I kind of love the woodcut art that they've gotten and everything. But we love the spicy food. We love the food that kind of thinks of, Dorne and sort of the Mediterranean style foods. I think this one is the so the one we mentioned in particular was the Dragonstone. Let me see if I can remember the exact name for it. The Dragonstone Jerhila, which was, we didn't do it with that approach. I mean, it's very proper, but the actual recipe of goat or lamb or mutton, like that is absolutely 100%. Really in keeping with Westeros, really keeping with those sorts of diets. By the way, we don't really eat lamb very much, so or goat, thank you. But I think we used beef when we did it, and it was delicious. It's I think that kind of food shows to me that she's a really good researcher trying to kind of get a sense of, okay, well, if there's always spices, right, that are mentioned in the books, like especially the trade from the Narrow Sea. And it's nice to see it being used, and also being used in a dish that is sort of a blend of the East and the West. So that was I think our favorite. That spicy lentil stew has actually looked really great as well. And now I'm not really an expert on historical cookery, so I can't really say how well she's managed to research it. But I think that from what I've seen before, I think she's done a really good job. Yes, you're right. Around. It's it is the case that she has really done her research, and she's done now a lot of books of this type about various other worlds and settings, and she really has put in her research. It was unfortunate that there was some kind of problem with her Twitter account prior to the book being published, so she couldn't help push it a bit as she should have, but I'm sure it's done quite well. Also, the High Garden dumplings look really great. We haven't gotten around to doing them, but I do really want to do them because they look fantastic.
Oh, I'd love to try the dumplings. It's a pity that I can't cook. But yes,
Well,
even though I'm Italian, I can't cook. So, hi Linda, nice to meet you.
Hello.
Hi.
Welcome to our channel.
How are you?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I really wanted to try the bread and salt recipe, which I think it's the epitome of everything Westeros. Yes. The classics, exactly. Let's start from the basis, because even though we're Italian, we don't cook. We really are not we don't respond to the stereotype of Italian good at cooking. That's a shame. That's shame on us.
Yeah.
We're gonna improve.
Hopefully, we're gonna improve.
Hopefully.
Cooking Westerosi food instead of Italian food.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we can start from pasta.
Yeah,
we can try.
So to give you, Linda, a bit of an update, we began talking about the trailer of House of the Dragon season 2. So if you want to give us your thoughts, that would be grateful, and then we can go on talking about House of the Dragon, because we have a couple of questions about the new shows and previous season. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, the trailer is certainly playing up the conflict. It's really at the center stage is the black versus the green. So they're doing a lot with that and really focusing on the fact that it's going to be a very obviously we're going into a war, so it's going to be a very conflict heavy season, and I think probably a very fast paced season. There's quite a lot of ground that they have to cover. I don't think there's going to be a lot of downtime. It's going to be pretty fast and furious.
Yeah, ground running, I guess, is the right way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, the end of the last season, obviously, we have a very big, I wouldn't call it a cliffhanger, but a very big event has to be reacted to by both sides.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see what they do. We have hints, obviously. We know some of the casting. We're going to see some very bloody responses.
So it'll start with a bang.
Yep.
It starts with a bang. And also, it's a cliffhanger because it happened near a cliff, so it's kind of
fair point.
Definition of it. Yeah. Exactly. So now we're gonna play 2 other videos sent by our dear friend Egg and Saya. You already know them. They hosted you on their channel a couple of years back, and they ask you about something about the House of the Dragon. So I'm gonna play the video and then the question.
Valar Morgulis, qui Egg della Cittadella, and welcome back to the Italian community, Elio and Linda. Thank you for your time, and thank you to the podcast for the opportunity. I'm here with a question on House of the Dragon, and then I leave my co-host Saya to ask about her beloved DUNK&EGG. So, House of the Dragon has been so far a pretty good adaptation of Fire and Blood, especially considering the fact that in the source material we don't get the first-hand recollection of the facts, and a lot of it is left to interpretation of the sources. Despite this, there are some things that can be considered objective changes made by the show. So, which changes from Fire and Blood did you like the most? And, on the other hand, what would you have preferred to be more faithful to the books?
I mean, the big change, of course, is that they have decided to settle on which narratives have happened and which haven't. So we don't get the conflicting Eustace and Mushroom and Orwell Bunkin giving us different versions of events. We get the event within the Game of Thrones universe, because this is the canon for the Game of Thrones universe. It has nothing to do really with the canon of books, because the books are separate from that. Just because some people insist like George is involved, this must be what really happened, and it's not really the case.
No, on some points it's obvious because we have the big age change with Alicent and Rhaenyra, which is probably my least favorite story change, just because I would have liked to see how it would play out with the ages as George intended them, because it gives a completely different dynamic. It allows them to do certain other things, which can be interesting, but I would have liked to see how it worked with more of the stepmother stepdaughter dynamic that was intended. So that sort of reframes the story a lot. On the other hand,
positive side, I think is because they had to make those choices. I kind of really liked how they depicted Kristen Cole and Rhaenyra's relationship, how that developed, how the conflict and how it fell apart. They're picking a side, they're picking a particular story to tell, but I think that worked quite well. And similarly, seeing the sort of conflicts between and sort of relationship that's very tense between Daemon and Rhaenyra as well is also very interesting. And if you really want to talk about a big change to a character, Viserys is a very different character from George has done. Even George has said like this has worked so well because there's so much pathos to it that he didn't really have in mind when he had Viserys. Viserys was just a nice guy who wasn't a particularly good king, and here he made him into a nice guy who maybe wasn't a particularly good king, but he was struggling under a great weight of responsibility that no one else could carry for him, and he was struggling alone through all of this. And I thought that was, I mean, Paddy Considine's. It's still shocking he didn't get nominated for.
Absolutely, no, that performance was really good. I mean, I don't necessarily like some of the. If we're looking at the sort of world changes, I'm not entirely on board with the whole. Targaryens knowing about this prophecy all along, and that's the burden that Viserys is carrying, but I like how it comes out in his character. So and it does also keep in some scenes the Viserys that George wrote. So I mean, it's not like you can't see that character in it either. It's not a complete. It is a more fleshed out character, but it still keeps the elements of George's Viserys. You can see the fellow who is a bit too lighthearted at some points. Enjoys his feasting and joking around, and at the same time, probably not suited really to being a king. He's not this sort of strong leader that would have been needed, especially as soon as things started getting a little rocky.
Yeah, I think Damon at some point in season 1 says being king is not his strongest trait, something like that, talking to Corlys Velaryon, I guess. Anyway, about this, I would also like to ask you, what do you think will be the changes in season 3 or 4? I don't know how many seasons we will get, because of the fact that the youngest characters also have an age change in relation to the books. For example, the youngest sons of Rhaenyra are very little.
Yeah, that one I don't know how they're gonna solve that, because Aegon isn't gonna be flying off anywhere on a dragon anytime soon. For example,
I don't think so.
That would be a very young dragon rider.
It's a very strange choice. I don't see why they felt the need. It does cause issues there. And on the other hand, you have
Baela and Rhaena
have been
older,
aged up and much older, so they're clearly, from trailers you can see they're much more involved in the action of events than they were in Fire and Blood, when they were too young, basically, for the most part, to make themselves shown during the Dance of Dragons until like right at the end, and then the aftermath in particular.
So
funny, I was listening to the last Ryan has a podcast himself about prop collecting with Dave Mandel. And they actually made a joke in that the final episode for this season, they're going to do another one, but the season, where he commented that he's sort of he joked about the fact that he'll be in the UK for another 4 years, and by the end of that he'll either be dead or he'll be rich. He's thinking at least 2 more seasons, I think. Anyways, so at least 4 seasons is I think the direction we're looking at.
It seems the natural plan.
Yeah.
Precisely where they want to end it, that's also a difficult one.
They can't go into that hour, I don't think.
No, I mean, if you're gonna go into the Hour of the Wolf for the Regency, you really need Aegon and then Viserys.
Age,
Viserys is going to be a very, very young father at this stage. I mean, he's already a young father, but I'm not sure Laura Lewis is going to be marrying a 5-year-old and having kids.
I'm sure he's 5 years old now.
So
it's a strange choice. I don't
precisely where they're going to cut off. Are they just going to end with Dragon having a snack, which would be a very blunt end point.
It would be indeed.
Yeah. So that's a little uncertain about where they're gonna, how they're gonna wrap it up with the ages of those characters, actually.
Do you think this change in ages will impact the world building they're trying to, I don't know, portray? Because it can be difficult if the characters are very little or younger than they are in the book.
Especially if they want to go on and do sort of an anthology show. I mean, now they're looking at Aegon the Conqueror, but it could be a possibility for them to go further on, and then you could start having issues where they might just have to hand wave, well, this guy should actually just be 10 years old, but we've made him 18 years old or whatever. I mean, we already have that where they changed the family tree at one point, obviously, because they changed the cut out Jaehaerys, right?
Yeah.
Lay further down. So
I guess what they could do is move. Oh, maybe the Hedgehog will tell us what they're doing. They can move Viserys's and Aegon's reigns sort of they last longer, and then Daeron, and then Aegon the Unworthy, and particularly Daeron the Good, rings could be shorter to kind of make up for it, to end up at the right time. But then,
Yeah.
if Baylor Breakspear is not in his 30s, that would probably be a tell that they aren't actually thinking that way. That was, of course, his being in his 30s is why we found that George had messed up in the Hedge Knight timeline of kings, and he ended up having to change Viserys from a younger son of Aegon II to his Aegon III, sorry, to his brother, which has a big impact, of course, on the Dance of Dragons.
So
now
they're going to mess up things all around, basically.
Yeah.
So
But
you have to fix things again.
We'll see kind of what they come up with.
Yeah.
So there can be a sort of butterfly effect, like George said about Game of Thrones.
Yeah, the ages definitely could.
It's
more of a dragon wing effect, actually, I think, in this case.
Yeah. I was going to say, yeah.
I was going to say that
as a question on world building. Yeah, I'm gonna leave.
Yes. Before we're talking with Elio about the world building of House of the Dragon and the world building in Game of Thrones. And Westeros is a rich and complex world, and no one knows it better than you. And there are so many different territories with their culture, customs, habits, so many greater and lesser houses, so much lore. And this is wonderful because it's what makes Westeros comes to life. And in my opinion, Game of Thrones in part failed to represent this richness and this variety of Westeros. House of the Dragon instead seems to be more careful. We're saying in episode 1 of House of the Dragon, at the tourney, we saw so many houses, so much heraldry, so many colors, and the show seems to be more careful about the world building and giving a fair portrayal of Westeros. So this is what I'd like to ask you. Talking about this world building, what did you like to see the most in the first season of House of the Dragon that we've never seen before in Game of Thrones? And what would you like to see the most in the upcoming seasons?
Well, the first season, I'd say saddles on dragons.
Yeah.
Very obvious one.
Much more comfortable and much more realistic.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, the heraldry, actually seeing more of the variety of heraldry, not just having everyone being under like the banner of a great house, seeing more of the houses, seeing more color. There's still a little bit of that medieval, that typical medieval movie look in that everything is a little bit desaturated, but it is Westeros at least has some more of the color back in, so definitely appreciated that part of it, and the scale of the tourney, and so getting some sense of the scale of Westeros and the epic scale of things. Obviously, budget was a problem the first season of Game of Thrones, but yes, the tourney and the hunt were not so impressive. On the other hand, the hunt in House of Dragon and the tourney in the House of Dragons, those were proper scale things, and you could really feel that these are big royal affairs.
Yeah. And the second season, well, we can see from the trailers that Harrenhal is going to feature. We really haven't dug too much into the history of Harrenhal, the curse of Harrenhal. I suspect we're going to get more of that. So that'd be nice to kind of add that sort of gothic element, I think, which I think will suit Daemon in particular, and Aemon as well, actually, come to think of it. So that's probably the second season.
Really seeing a good rendition of Harrenhal, yes, and obviously getting a good sense of dragon. I mean, even if we had dragons in Game of Thrones and there was a little bit of sort of not really dragon on dragon action, because you had the resurrected Viserion, but there was, so actually seeing some dragon fights is going to be spectacular. Seeing that very important part of Westeros history, of the Targaryen history, and seeing just how dominant and dangerous, and what a big impact the dragons had on the history.
Yeah.
And we'll definitely see dragon clashes in season 2.
Yeah.
I think we have one last question about House of the Dragon before moving to the next topic.
And it's about the Greyjoys, because our dear Patreon, Jando, it's a big, big fan of this house. And he keeps asking about the Greyjoys. When are we going to see them? When are they going to show up?
The Iron Islands in general.
The Iron Islands in general, and the Greyjoys. We know that they are great characters, and they participate in the Dance of the Dragon. So what do you think will happen with the Greyjoys?
And also, did you like the representation of the Ironborns and Greyjoys in particular in Game of Thrones?
Okay, that's okay. First question as to the House of Dragon. I think, unfortunately, the fact is Dalton Greyjoy, the Red Kraken, he doesn't quite do what people expect him to do, and while he participates, a lot of it is off on the West Coast. It doesn't, he doesn't show up in King's Landing. He doesn't show up. So I suspect this is going to be an area where we'll hear mentions, but I don't think we'll actually see them, because none of our main characters will actually directly interact with him. So I don't see them kind of going out of their way to get him in, unless they do something like, instead of Bravusi fleets being involved, maybe somehow the Ironborn put jetpacks on their ships and they show up in time to take part in the events. The old Game of Thrones answer to things. They have jetpacks; they can get around fast. I hope not. I don't like that. I can understand, but if they really just want to kind of have them for the and Dalton sounds like he'd be a fun character. I stopped watching by the time Euron kind of Greyjoy showed up. So people I know have even the actor apparently was disappointed in how they portrayed him on the show. So I hopefully if Dalton does show up, we'll get more of what George intended, and not.
Yeah, Euron was one of those very, very odd missteps in
Pilu Asbeck, right? That's the Danish actor.
Yes, and if everything we've heard from him, he was hoping to play the character as written. He thought that was a great role, and got something else entirely. And I think they kind of, they did a good job with Theon, and did a really good job with Theon, and some of the elements of certainly sort of the look of Pike, and there was some.
I love Jawadi's score for the Iron Islands and sort of being that point out. And I think that episode where Theon, I've always praised it. The second season episode, Theon's back on the Iron Islands, and he's just trying to whether he should write his letter to Robb or not, or whether he should join his father's campaign. And the music and the lighting, I think it's Alex Sakharov that directed that episode.
Yeah, that's right.
Fantastic episode, is one of my favorites actually of the show. So I've always been very fond of it. I was not fond of Yara instead of Asha. I think that was a mistake on their part to think would get confused, but so be it. And I know from I didn't watch, but I kind of know generally how things went, and things went pear-shaped towards the end of the Iron Islands. So hopefully, if they show up, they will they'll at least make it work in a reasonable way. Most of the Iron Islands stuff is really post-dance. Some really cool stuff, actually. Particularly,
I think it would be as much as it's nice to see all different facets of Westeros, and I can understand the idea of wanting to pull in houses that were central to Game of Thrones, wanting to show that. I think it would be a mistake to try and kind of shoehorn the Ironborn into this story and have it front and center, because they are too much off to the side, and it is a later part of the story. So better that they leave it potentially for some other adaptation then, or have it in the Egg and the Conqueror material.
Yeah.
showing up
Yeah.
there, and people just have to wait a little bit for it in my case.
Yeah, let's hope we can reach that Greyjoy POV in our reread of the books before they kind of show up and maybe butcher again the characters. And yeah, but speaking of other adaptation, we know that there is a production ongoing for the Dunk&EGG novellas. It's a surprise. Not really a surprise, but we're glad it's happening. We're just gonna wait and see how. But Saya has a question about this adaptation. I'm gonna show the video and then you can answer the question.
Hi Linda, this is Saya from La Cittadella, and we are so glad to see you back in the Italian community and with podcast del Ghiaccio del Fuoco, no less. They truly are amazing and you couldn't have asked for better interviewers. And of course, we'd like to thank them for giving us the opportunity to ask you guys a question. Unfortunately, me and Egg couldn't record together. Our schedules are pretty hectic as of late, but of course we've brainstormed and came up with the questions together. After X, I'm here about the adaptation of the Dunk&EGG novellas. We know that production for season 1 is underway, and Peter and Dexter seem to embody their characters perfectly. I truly cannot wait to watch the series. One fascinating thing about the novellas, in my opinion, is that the characters tell stories about Westeros' past in a way that makes them almost seem like fairy tales. From the little cheeky lion facing the Lion of Lannister to the Battle of the Rector's Field. And of course, we have the stories about dragons and magic, which in the Song of Ice and Fire universe we know those aren't fictional at all. And perhaps it is these elements that make these stories so fairy tale-like. In the books, everything's accompanied by evocative images, similar to the one you can actually find in fairy tale books, especially the old ones. The wonderful, wonderful work of Gary Gianni. Since this is a live action and not an animated product, I found myself wondering, how do you think this fairy tale effect can be maintained? The very one which manages to convey and let readers see the story unfold before their eyes. Are words truly enough, or might it be time to introduce flashbacks? I send you love, and I hope to see you guys again soon. Bye, Balardo Aeris.
That's a very long question, but
It's a great question though, because our initial thing is like our thing like they probably won't do flashbacks, or I mean, it was a David and Dan thing, but they resisted it. So it's not a thing that necessarily Ira Parker, having the new showrunner, I don't think he necessarily has to feel that way. But I was thinking very funny. I was kind of thinking, we kind of have some of that fairy tale element right in the Hedge Knight with the puppeteers, when they have their puppets with Florian the Fool and John Quill. And I was thinking about, I don't know if any of you have watched the Netflix animated series that George praised so much, the Blue Eye Samurai.
Yep.
And they have an episode that features traditional Japanese puppetry. I'm thinking it'd be funny, like every time someone starts talking about how Damon Blackfire dueled Egwene Corbray for an hour, you have puppets kind of showing up. And I mean, Italy has a very traditional puppetry, doesn't it?
In Sicily.
Yes, exactly.
Can we imagine having someone recounting and having these puppets kind of doing this combat, or these puppet dragons? It'd be fun. It'd be fun for them to do something like that. I don't know what they will, because it is
they absolutely could. It entirely depends on sort of what tone they want to take with the Dunk&EGG adaptation. There would be a way of doing it as something of more of a medieval flavor to it, looking at the various the Cameron and sort of having that kind of storytelling. It's and having, yes, I could see how you could sort of do it in the bit more rustic way in a sense, and having then flashbacks via puppetry or
something else,
or something like that. So it would have to be them choosing to have that particular tone for the story and for the TV show. Hard to say if they will, or if they would just do maybe one episode. It depends on if they are willing to experiment. I mean, more long-running shows obviously have had episodes that have been in different styles and experimental styles. I don't know if they would do that in a maybe
An
what,
HBO property like
sixth
this.
episode season or whatever they're thinking for.
Yeah. It'd be interesting. I was thinking, I mean,
It has interesting possibilities.
It has possibilities. They really could play with that. They could not. It really depends on kind of what style they want to flavor they want to put. But I was thinking, you know, it was a surprise, a pleasant surprise, I think, when they said they were adapting it. And I mean, Ryan Condal has said that, you know, when he first was brought in by George, the first thing he did was he pitched the Hedge Knight as a series, and they didn't want to do that. Then, funnily enough, Brian Cogman, who was the first person to tackle the material of Dance of the Dragons with George, he also, his first pitch was actually, hey, should we do the Hedge Knight? Because he's also a fan. So two writers and producers kind of around this world both thought, hey, there's a lot of potential in this. So I think HBO was right to go for it. And yeah, I would love to see them play with it. I mean,
I hope it's being told. I mean, my hope would be that it gets told in a less gritty and more melancholy way.
There's certainly, it starts with melancholy. It starts with the death of
because it doesn't have to be as grim and gritty as Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. It could be something more
wistful.
Something more wistful. And there, in that, if you do it that way, you can definitely see how the fairy tale aspect of the stories could fit in very nicely.
Yeah. Also because it's a world without dragons, so this melancholy that you talked about is fitting, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
it's a world that is as the most magical thing that ever existed is gone, and they're living in the shadow of it, and it's still a fine time, but there's still that mark there. There's still that, and obviously when you get to, if they go to this you know, to the Mystery Night, you're gonna get hoping on dragon eggs, and if you get this, and also, you know, people having dreams about things, and yeah, that'd be interesting.
But they could, whether they will dare to do it, give it a completely different flavor.
Yeah, that's the big thing.
Or if they don't want to keep it more in the vein of the shows that have been successful. But I definitely hope that they go for a different flavor, showing a different side of Westeros.
Long ago, George said that there had been some interest in the Hedge Knight, but then A Knight's Tale came out, and that has a very different tone in some senses. But it told a kind of similar story of a guy who wasn't who wasn't a traditional knight, coming into attorneys and so on, and you even have Chaucer and so on. But that, hopefully they don't go that far into the.
Okay. I would also like to know from you something about George, if you know it, because I had the feeling at the beginning that he didn't want to do Dunk&EGG as a TV adaptation. Why do you think he changed his mind?
Yeah, that's a question we have after. It says, yeah.
Yes,
we're gonna show the video, and then we're gonna answer the question of Bea and Stan, which is another of our part of our community. I'm gonna translate the question because he sent us a video in Italian, but that's no problem. Okay.
Ciao Elio e Linda, e ciao anche ai ragazzi, ovviamente ciao ai ragazzi del podcast del Ghiaccio del Fuoco, che ad oggi ringrazio di avermi dato l'opportunità di porre una domanda ad Elio e Linda. La mia domanda riguarda il prequel del Cavaliere dei Sette Regni. Per meglio dire, è una domanda che si collega a un'altra domanda, quindi sono due ma sono strettamente collegate. La prima domanda è questa, ovvero che essendo il Cavaliere dei Sette Rini praticamente annunciato, c'è il cast dei due personaggi principali, c'è il cast anche per quanto riguarda ovviamente gli altri personaggi, è stato ufficialmente mostrato il teaser in cui c'era la scritta del nome del prequel e tutto quanto, quindi è un'opera praticamente addirittura d'arrivo, in lavorazione e quant'altro. Volevo chiedere, cosa ha portato Martin a cambiare idea sul portare un prequel su DUNK&EGG prima della fine del Cavaliere dei Sette Regni? Perché, per quel che ricordiamo, Martin disse all'epoca che avrebbe probabilmente portato qualcosa su di loro una volta finite le novelle, ma le novelle ancora non sono concluse. Cosa ha portato lui a decidere di cambiare idea? E un'altra domanda che si ricollega direttamente a questo è, secondo voi si riuscirà a gestire il prequel su DUNK&EGG avendo le novelle in lavorazione, o si potrebbe andare a creare una situazione come per Game of Thrones, che ha portato poi ovviamente a determinate problematiche che abbiamo visto all'interno della serie TV stessa? Niente, questa era la domanda, ringrazio ancora il podcast e un saluto sia al podcast ovviamente e ad Elio e Linda.
Perspective from Vittorio. It's really interesting. Yes, I think partly what's happening is Hope Springs Eternal with George, that he can just write all the novellas in time to keep up with the schedule if HBO wants to have more seasons. I personally, I've said this online, I've said it to our editor. George should consider, there's no reason that the DUNK&EGG have to be finished as novellas. Like, he has this great opportunity to give HBO story treatments of his ideas, 5-page outlines or something of whatever's normal story treatment in Hollywood, describing the major characters, the plots of all the stories he had in mind, and he can oversee Ira Parker and the writers, turning them into future episodes of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. I think he really should do this. There's no reason in my mind that it has to stay a story that is a novella. And I don't know quite why George seems to want to continue. I know he loves writing novellas. I know he loves writing these characters, but I think I think it'd be better for him, and I think it'd be great for HBO if he just said, you know what, here are 50 pages of the next 10 stories for DUNK&EGG, going from the village hero and the she-wolves all the way to Summer Hall, and go. Let's do it. Let's do seasons of 8-episode seasons where 4 episodes per novella, and we could be done in 5 years or whatever. Why not? That'd be fantastic. But I hope to have that conversation directly with George at some point. He's going to be in the UK, and I will ask him, like, why not do that? And maybe he has already decided. I don't know, but right now it sounds like he wants to write it. So right now, if he really wants to write it, he's just thinking, well, I'll be able to keep up, which maybe he will, but maybe he won't. And it'd be better that he does the story treatments, I think. Less stress for him, less stress for HBO, and maybe they'll say, great, we're committing to doing 5-6 seasons of this. Why not?
On the other hand, it's less of a, I think HBO feels that it is less of a gamble in the sense that the novellas as they are don't end on cliffhangers. Yeah. They are self-contained stories. Yes, you don't get the full story of DUNK&EGG, but in each novella you get a full story. So they are able to film those 3 and
start with, sure,
and leave it at that.
And I think there's talk of maybe filling in the trip to Dorne, perhaps.
Yes. So I mean, it doesn't have to go on from there. As in, it would be good the way it is. It is not the full story of Dunk, but it's 3 good stories in Westeros.
Yeah.
So I think that's partially probably what HBO is thinking, that they don't necessarily need to have everything.
I mean, I think of like the Sharp series with Sean Bean. Those were done over a long period of time, with my understanding, and they don't necessarily feel like we have to go and see year after year, do one book after another. We could just kind of drop in and out when the mood hit us. So
and obviously the character age.
That's true.
Yeah.
Although the first several stories have a very young egg, so they kind of there's only so long they can hold off on doing those parts of the stories before they jump ahead to an older actor or what have you. So very strange. It reminds me of Rome, the TV series, where you have Octavian as a very young man, a youth, and then suddenly, he goes away, and the next season he comes back as a jump in 10 years or whatever, and he's a completely different person, a completely different actor. I guess we'll have that happening. It worked very well, I thought, in House of the Dragons. They managed to cast the young actresses to match their older very well, but it'll be strange if they do like one season this character and one season somebody else entirely.
Yeah, but it's like very, very good that they casted a very young actor, so he can grow into that role. So they can keep the little one to play Hag for a long period of time. So that's good.
And certainly the case that with this show, I mean, they're thinking we can film this year and have it out next year. So in theory, if they approve it, they could film 2025 and have it at least in the bank for 2026 if they want to have like back to back with the next season of House of the Dragon, or they want to just push it another year. They don't have to necessarily have the same pacing.
Yeah, maybe their idea was to alternate 1 year House of the Dragon and the other DUNK&EGG series.
But we also know that the DUNK&EGG series has a lighter production because it doesn't have dragons, and it's shorter. It's accepted, I think. So it could also we could also have one season of the DUNK&EGG novellas each year. Don't you think so? Or do you think that HBO will want to alternate, as Kara said, with House of the Dragon?
Well, I mean, there's always there are other things kind of in the wind. That
kind of depends on how that is going as well. If they decide that they're going to go ahead with Egg and the Conqueror as well, then they might just as well want to get these seasons.
And what you'll have is basically you'll have DUNK&EGG every season, and then you'll have House of a Dragon, and then maybe it's the Conquests as the alternating back and forth instead. And DUNK&EGG is kind of the bridge between them, so that there's always something in the pipeline. There's no downtime. I think possibly that's one thing HBO felt that maybe the long wait after Game of Thrones, it was longer than they wanted. They obviously, I know there's a question about Blood Moon, but they were looking at doing stuff earlier, and that didn't quite go as they wanted. And they may have felt like we maybe lost some of the heat, which all the heat wasn't necessarily good heat, but they may have felt that maybe it fell out of the cultural conversation a bit faster than they would have liked if they had been able to continue another show. Right? Also, the idea of DUNK&EGG every year and then basically just House of a Dragon and something else alternating back and forth. I don't see it as an impossible thing. And whether there will be too much, I know there are people who are kind of like, oh, the Targaryens again, the dragons again. But it makes it very dramatic. It's kind of central and very dramatic storytelling and very epic storytelling, very fantasy storytelling. So I can see that. It'll be interesting with Matt and Tomlin. As he said in a recent interview, it's very early days yet on the script for that. So it's just in development, but be interesting if it goes forward.
Yeah. And Domenico, you had a question about a specific character of the novellas.
Okay. I just have a question about the character of Arion Brightflame. In the novel, The Edge Knight, we meet for the first time Arion Brightflame, and we know very little about it. We know of the Ashford Meadow and the fact that he fought Ali at least for a long period, and in Essos he had some child, and the last child was Maegor, the legitimate son. So we can have some other information about the family tree of Brightflame in this series.
I would say probably yes. There's more to his story. I know. There's more to his story than what we've been told so far. George has extensive notes about the whole DUNK&EGG era, and Arion does kind of figure into them to some degree. So yes, I couldn't say for sure in A Song of Ice and Fire itself it would come out, but it's certainly part of what he would plan for the whole DUNK&EGG cycle. Anyways.
Okay. because
and obviously Fire and Blood Volume 2, if he does that, I'm sure that'll get more into it as well.
Yes, and some he wouldn't even tell us.
No, there were bits he wouldn't tell us. He would just said, "Ooh, that's nasty," but I didn't tell you.
I'm not going to tell you about it.
So yeah, sometimes you are just fun like us.
Yes, yes.
He won't tell you things.
He definitely did some teasing when he was going over some of those notes.
Yeah, because I think that it could be interesting for the lore of Asriaf if we know that there are the sublimes of Arion Blackflame in Essos, and he had some child and the other child. So I have some theory about this, but I don't know.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens.
It's not out of the question, certainly, that he has descendants hanging around or had descendants hanging around in
It's possible in Essos, yes.
Yeah.
I think his story in Westeros is actually more important than what happens in Essos. That's just my theory based on the hints we've had from George.
Yeah.
But I definitely think people. He plays a role in events that maybe aren't necessarily obvious to us yet. Just the way that George kind of talked around it a little bit, felt like he had plans.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. This is my thoughts, and this is my question about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So before we were talking about Blood Moon, because for the ones who didn't know, we sent them a schedule of sorts with all the questions, so they know we're gonna have a question about Blood Moon by Lucio and Vittorio. So again, we're gonna show the video. They know the question. They already know everything. It's okay. 3, 2, 1, go.
Tornati a Linda ed Elio nella nostra piccola ma molto attiva community italiana delle cronache del ghiaccio e del fuoco. È sempre un piacere avervi qui per dialogare dell'opera di Martin
e per farvi domande molto scomode, ce ne rendiamo conto.
I nostri colleghi del podcast ci hanno detto che parlerete molto di serie televisive tra House of the Dragon e A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. Per oggi vogliamo farvi una domanda in generale sul tema delle serie e anche ripescare una vecchia serie che però non è più nata, e cioè Blood Moon. E magari vogliamo sapere cosa ne pensate di questa serie, se magari sapete qualcosa in più sul perché, nonostante sia stato girato un pilota anche molto costoso, il progetto non è andato in porto per motivi vari.
E in più vorremmo sapere se un progetto simile, ovvero ambientato in un momento storico del passato, comunque non trattato direttamente in tante cose scritte da Martin, sia ancora fattibile, perché da un lato sarebbe interessante vedere periodi storici non coperti anche in altri libri, ma da un lato sarebbe un prodotto quasi del tutto originale, visto che non ci sono tutte queste grandi indicazioni da parte di George Martin, però sarebbero interessanti.
A differenza di House of the Dragon, Blood Moon sarebbe stato vagamente un adattamento, ma più un'opera praticamente originale, però nel mondo di Martin, quindi sarebbe buono, sarebbe male, cosa ne pensate voi? Fateci sapere. E ringraziamo i ragazzi e le ragazze del podcast per averci invitato per questa amica collaborazione con tutti gli altri membri della community. Grazie in anticipo per la risposta e a presto.
Great question. I think Blood Moon, we actually worked on it, or consulted on it, I should say, a little bit. Early on, I actually don't know where they were in the production, but they contacted us, and I revealed they wanted our thoughts on basically they wanted to do something like the painted table, but I think they were calling it the white table, that would show the boundaries of the kingdoms that existed at the time, and like what would the kingdoms have been back then. And we said this is all speculation. George might want to look at it if he's involved, but so we kind of put together a map of how we thought how things back then, set in an era from before the Long Night, would have looked like. Perhaps it was just pure speculation. We were pointing out, we have information about various houses that once held Bear Island. We have names of houses that once held White Harbor before it was White Harbor, and we kind of put it together. We had the Blackwoods in the Wolf's Wood, and various other things like that, even down to the south. They wanted to know kind of what their kingdoms were like with the Casterlys and all these things. So we did that, but that was our, we talked to the producers, Jane Goldman and her partner was working on that.
So they were trying to establish certainly
a world building in
a
the
world
world,
building
yes.
and lore that would be build on the little bits and pieces that existed, or try and extrapolate from existing materials for later periods. So they definitely wanted to try and extrapolate from that.
But I think the problem, I mean, so I believe from James Hibbard's reporting, he kind of said, George signed off on it for kind of, but seemed dubious that it would work. He didn't think, and we don't know why he thought he was dubious about it. At the end of the day, we don't really know why they decided not to go forward. We've seen some pictures in the last year, I think, of behind the scenes of costuming and of armor, but things very kind of Roman inspired and interesting attempt to kind of give the ancient Westeros a feel of its own. But then George said, I don't know why they didn't go for it. They won't even allow me to see the pilot. So is that a bad sign? That was so bad, but they decided, no, we're just going to bury it? Or was it?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, the thing to me is when you look about these past historical periods, there's a richness that, the Royal Spire, Nymeria, we mentioned Nymeria's journey. I think Brian Hagelin recently talked about the fact that his pitch, he'd happily still go forward with it if they wanted to do his Nymeria pitch, where he saw it as an epic kind of like Exodus, or but at the same time, there's a lot of invention has to be done, and I don't know how fond George is of people other than himself inventing. I mean, as we said, when we worked in the world as a flyer, we invented very little. We invented names of some maesters and some books primarily. Almost everything that we invented was run by him, and like the biggest world building thing we did was we suggested, well, why were Tullys the biggest house at the time of the conquest? Why not the Blackwoods or the Brackens? They seem so major. And so we had this whole thing where there was this recent conflict between them that hampered Heron's completion of Harrenhal, and he wrecked both houses a bit and decimated them, and that's why they weren't the big houses at the time. And George liked that, and he went with it. But he's he wants, it's his world. It's not anyone's playground. It's his playground. So I think the problem with anything with Blood Moon, and I suspect anything else set in a period he hasn't directly written about in some detail, is that the other people are going to have to do a lot of inventing, and I think George isn't going to be happy with it.
I would guess, given the failure of Blood Moon, that George is probably not going to go for that sort of thing again.
Yeah.
Now, signing off on a project that is more nebulous.
I mean, we do have he has talked several times of the animated ET series, which is kind of interesting.
True, but on the other hand, it doesn't have to add up to Westeros. If you do something like Blood Moon, you have to be able to see the lines going down to the history that he has established for Westeros. It has to be a history that matches up to some degree, or as much as possible. E.T. he has so very little detail for, and he doesn't have anyone in present day from the story speaking E.T. So it's not going to affect as much.
No, that's true.
That of course is not why HBO passed on Blood Moon. I'm going to say they would. I don't think they would care.
Well,
but I suspect that it may not have had the right flavor. That they felt that it wasn't capturing at all.
Right.
What
I want to say is the one thing I think Hibbard reported afterwards, after Blood Moon's failure, is they kind of had a complete 180 where they decided George shouldn't just be consulted. George should actually sign off and actually have approval to some degree on this. That he has to buy in completely into it. Otherwise, we shouldn't do it. That he knows his world best, and no one else can really do it. So I think yes, the flavor possibly wasn't there, but I think it also made him realize, like, he probably has a point that if he's not the one creating the world, it's not going to feel.
No, it's not going to feel like Westeros. Yeah.
So the Blood Moon was just too far in the past. If they had done something much closer,
they might have been able to pull it off.
They might have been able to pull it off. I mean, I know that they were doing a conquest thing, of course, and we heard this horrible story about a drunk egg in the Conqueror, and it sounded ridiculous. Yeah, I think that's the big thing. I mean, part of the genesis of Fire and Blood, like part of the reason George wrote it is, I mean, he had this history that he had written for the world of Ice and Fire, sitting there, and so much of it had just been compressed into much smaller for the book, and he just had it there, and he figured, I'll just fill out the Jaehaerys reign. I have a book just like that. Let's take it so long with ones. But I think part of the genesis as well was to kind of set in stone some of his history of the Targaryens, so that HBO didn't necessarily come up with people say, hey, we've got a guy who's come up with this idea for his great story. And George says, yeah, okay, I recognize the name of the characters, but none of these things actually happen in my version of history. Now he actually point and say, here's the text. They can actually use this to kind of make their stories for the Targaryens up to the Aegon. They could do the Old King. They could do something with Jaehaerys. They could easily do that. I mean, George obviously wanted House of the Dragon to start with, before the council, even with the sons of Jaehaerys and so on. So it'd be it's a long way to say is like, if George isn't creating the world, if he hasn't created the history, it's probably not going to fly very well. But if he buys into it, if he gets involved, why not?
We can certainly change his mind and
absolutely.
Of course.
Of course. And about the conquest, we have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, we were talking about the fact that Mattson Tomlin is working on a TV adaptation of The Conquest, which is in its very early stages. So what do you think will be the main challenges for this series, and the differences between adapting The Dance of the Dragons and adapting The Conquest for the small screen? And also, do you reckon that some characters will have to be modified compared to what we read in Fire and Blood to make them truly round characters, as it has been done, for example, with Alicent in House of the Dragon? After all, Fire and Blood is not a completely accurate historic source, we know it. Plus, it seems to me that it has a tendency to belittle female characters.
Fire and Blood in general, you feel, has that tendency, or the Conquest period?
Fire and Blood, the maester that writes Fire and Blood.
Yes, Yandel, and then also you have Eustace, who has a particular, and Mushroom as well has a very carnal and sort of lurid take on everything. So no, it's true, but there is I feel like the Conquest itself is much less marked by that, because it's actually the first piece George wrote for the World of Ice and Fire, and I don't think he really had his conception then of his maester. But it's a very straightforward history. It's not there's not a lot of detail. I certainly is a challenge. In particular, the main one is that you have very distinctly drawn Visenya and Rhaenys. We have the dark sister and the light sister. But Aegon, the central thing about him is like he's a mystery. Like he's supposed to be mysterious, and you can't really have him be, I'm Aegon, and then disappearing, Batman style. That there has to be more to him. So there's certainly that'll be a tricky area, I think. And now Mattson Tomlin very recently said in an interview he's promoting his Terminator anime on Netflix. It's coming out next month, I think, which I'm looking forward to. A kind of interesting idea. But it's early days, he said, but he is working closely with George, he says, and so I'm sure George is filling him in on some ideas and concepts he has for this. Modified, I think characters will be deepened is the main thing. I mean, there'll be more depth to them because they're not being looked at from a distance by historians. Like, there's very little, like if you compare how George writes the reign of Jaehaerys, there's a lot more personal color about these characters in that section. As I said, because the Aegon materials, the first material he wrote for World of Fire, he had a much more straight chronological history, and he didn't really add a lot of these details that he would add later. So I think there's room for it. And also, I mean, an interesting take would I like the take some people put forward. I kind of pondered it as well. It's like, imagine telling the story of a conquest without the Targaryens being a point of view at all. They're just the invaders, and you're following the people in Westeros who are facing this terrifying onslaught by these people with, these strange alien people with dragons, and attacking you. That I don't think from how Tomlin talks about it that that's how we're doing it. It's very much about Aegon and his sisters. He's talked about him as Alexander the Great, but he wants to kind of dig into the emotions and like what did the character feel about what they were doing, and I think it has potential. I think certainly HBO thinks it has potential. But I think George probably thinks it has potential.
Yeah.
It would be really interesting. And it would be, can I say, refreshing, because we already have the Targaryen POV in House of the Dragons. So it would be interesting to see a different POV.
It would be really good to kind of see at least anchor a bit with some of the characters outside of the Targaryen side, on the opposite side, and like how they are dealing with what's happening, and not just immediately say, yeah, we're on board with the Targaryens entirely. I mean, George has revealed the whole thing that Aegon was a dreamer, but he was motivated in part by this dream, the sense that he was destined to do this. Linda has we don't know how much, but what Ryan has run with that, I don't know how much of that is accurate. This idea that the Targaryens handed down this knowledge down in the line, but at least we know it kind of informed Aegon and his sisters. I mean, I presume it's not a coincidence that Visenya unveils a three-headed dragon symbol, and we know that this is part of this prophecy. So I think it could be really interesting. We'll see if it goes forward. I do think I can see a lot of fun with it. I could also see it being. I can see the people saying this is more of the same, and being not so enthused. So I think he does have to capture something different, I think, than just, here's these beautiful incestuous people with dragons. You have to give a little something else.
Yeah, I think that can be interesting, in an interesting way of portraying the conquest can be the change of POVs. Like the lens through which we see the conquest can change. We have the field of fire that can be shown through the lens of the people of the rich and the people of the West. Yes, exactly. And then as the prophecy can be shown through the lens of the Starks, which the theory goes basically in the fandom that Aegon shared the prophecy, the dream, with the Torrhen Stark, and then Torrhen Stark knelt because of the prophecy. It can be an interesting thing to do, I think. It can be done beautifully, yes. Then I think we have another question, but on a different upcoming project, which we would like to see in person, me and Bea, because we'd like to go to London for this, which is the stage play, The Iron Throne. That's I think the title that they gave it, and it's definitive. We are eager to know more about this stage play that will hopefully debut the end of this year, as stated by George himself. Do you think we'll get to know more about the true nature of the relationship between Rhaegar and Lyanna, and the motivation that led up to Robert's rebellion from this play? Or will it only cover the Arnell's tourney? What stories?
Interesting. Yeah, we've wondered a lot about it as well. We don't know anything more than anyone else does, really. I don't think it'll be debuting at the end of this year, just because usually you start hearing things happening before that. It's a long process to hammer out, and there are stories of productions that have taken years to kind of get off the ground. So I won't hold my breath for it. It'd be nice if they start revealing maybe by the end of the year that they're starting to kind of put it together for the year after. But yeah, as to, I presume the idea is it will reveal fairly openly detailed what happened between Rhaegar and Lyanna at Harrenhal. I think George is not going to bury it anymore. Now, whether he always figured, well, I plan to reveal this stuff in the Winds of Winter anyways, so I'll surely have it out by then. So I don't know if that's a part of the factor why it's not done yet. Maybe he kind of says, I have to get that one out first. But in that case, the Winds of Winter will reveal some of these details first. But I do think the idea is it's primarily about Harrenhal. I presume it's going to start because of the Iron Throne focus. It's going to kind of ground itself in the problem of Aerys, his madness, and the realm kind of uncertainty about how to go forward. Rhaegar trying to deal with his crazy father, but then it'll lead into, we have obviously George wrote The Year of the Fall Spring, which I presume is going to be a big part of what is the basis of the story, where he has hints about.
Do you think they're seeing the idea of it as a sort of very Shakespearean, dynastic conflict?
Yeah, I certainly a father and a son in this deep conflict where a father who's afflicted
and setting at this one key moment where things sort of come to a head.
I think it's very dramatic. And it sounds like it's a very dramatic event. George has always said, people asked him about Harrenhal. He said, a lot happened at Harrenhal.
Yeah,
there are stories yet untold about Harrenhal. So I think Harrenhal will be enough for a stage play or a big musical production. I don't quite know exactly what it's going to be. I mean, the company putting it together are not just straightforward.
We say always on our channel that the Martin works are full of Shakespearean quotes and Shakespearean works. I study literature and I postmodern literature, and I thought that Martin take a lot of quotes about the TV series, the TV show, the movies of Hollywood, and the Shakespeare is the literature based on Martin. We underlined every time that we can do it about the importance of Shakespeare on the plot, on the structure of plot and character, on the Asoya, for example. Sometimes we have to talk about the Magi and the history of Cersei, and it's very similar to Macbeth, for example. There is very, very important quote, or the Richard III about the history of Stannis. There is a lot of quotes about Shakespeare. It's very, very interesting, and it's interesting the way in which Martin mixed the quotes of Shakespeare and the movies and the cartoons. I think that is the one of the most interesting things about the Martin words. So I am very, very happy that you, Linda, talk about Shakespeare, because it is very, very important for me.
Well, you've seen his fan letter to Marvel Comics when he was a kid. Where he basically said, whoever William Shakespeare is, Stan Lee's here. So it's Stan Lee, and then it's William Shakespeare in order. So yes, Shakespeare is very important, I think, in sort of the histories and the tragedies. Less the comedies, perhaps, but the histories and the tragedies for sure have left an imprint, I think, with George in a strong way. Now, obviously, he has other influences, but Shakespeare, there's a thread of it through a lot. But I think you could see in Aerys, there's a bit of Titus Andronicus, and there's a bit of Lear, and there's all sorts of things like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say yes. King Aerys' reign is an inversion, a darker version of King Lear. That's
because after he take the Shakespearean character and he changed and he destroyed the dream and the tale of Shakespeare and the tragedy of Shakespeare, and he described a world in which the tragedy is real, but it's not an epic tragedy. It's a lower tragedy.
Yeah.
The importance of lower instincts in Martin's character is very, very important.
Yeah. It's not as poetic, but it is poetic enough that we can recognize all the Shakespearean influences in this work.
In literature we say that there are an camp aesthetics in which lore
Shakespeare is one of the best examples in literature where we can see the high and the low mixed together, like George wants to do.
No, and I think that's absolutely one of the strengths of A Song of Ice and Fire. It is that he takes all these different influences and that he deals with the epic, and he deals with the baser parts of life, and he shifts very easily from one mode to another. It's just like, and he can write in many different styles, like with some chapters, approaching a horrific feel. There are comedic elements, and he's really good at handling all these different elements. But yes, the reason that I sort of stumbled in on that thought with the Harrenhal stage production is that I've never really thought that much about what a stage production would be like. In sort of, I guess I thought of it, it's a stage production is like modern theater, and I for me, I found it very hard to try and picture what that could be like. It felt too modern somehow. Everything that I could think of applying, and then suddenly when we were talking here, it's a Shakespearean. You can make a Shakespearean drama out of it. You can make it an older style, whether they're doing that, but that would definitely work.
Yeah. I mean, the company, I have looked at some of them. I mean, they primarily did sort of spectacular sort of productions, sort of things with a lot of spectacle.
Yeah.
And I mean, just the other day I saw a trailer for or sort of a promotional trailer for I didn't mention it to you, the Stranger Things has a London musical kind of production about.
Oh, that's right.
The Stranger,
about that. Yes.
The Creel character, how he, and it looks very spectacular, kind of live action, and it looks like it has music and it has dancing, but it also has this scary stuff and drama, and I think probably it would be something like that, and not necessarily a straight dramatic piece, but something that is
you
that
could,
is a musical drama
in terms of the story building. You could you could lean into older epics as well, and to get that
tragedy,
to give it that weight.
That's great.
It'll be interesting.
It will be really interesting. We're really eager, Karen and I, most of all, to see it. So
we experienced Broadway. We want to experience the West End. And we're nearing the end of our, let's call it a meeting, I guess. It's not an interview. If you have questions, you can ask them. But we have one last for you, and it's really important for us. Last but not least, this is our dear friend Laura that has asked you something I think really interesting. I'm going to show the video again and then back to the answer.
Hi, my name is Laura, from the Italian YouTube channel La Madre dei Draghi, in English, Mother of Dragons. I know it's funny, I'm not blonde, but I can work on that. I have a few Targaryen wigs in the closet. Anyway, my questions are as follows. Over the years, how has your relationship with George Martin changed from a working point of view? How much did you help him in the past, and how much support are you giving to him now, given that he is busy with many projects at the same time? Are you involved in the writing process? And second question, the next book that will be published will be The Winds of Winter, or will we read other DUNK&EGG novels first? Thank you and have a good day. Bye.
All right, so great question. So as we've said before, I mean, as time has gone on, as George has gotten busier and he's gotten more assistants and so on, there's been fewer questions our way.
it's easier to have the assistants in-house and in the same time.
Particularly T. Mickle, who's helped with House of Dragon, who I believe possibly written an episode this season. She was in charge of. She's been in charge of a lot of lore stuff. I recall when we were in Belfast and we were talking about the fact that George hadn't yet revealed the color of Meraxes, I think, or Volgar.
Meraxes, I think.
At the time, and we joked, and he said, "Oh," and literally told T, "You put together a list of the colors of all dragons, and we'll figure out the ones we haven't said yet." And now that list exists, so she's been doing that kind of work. We've exchanged an email earlier this year about I sent him the email last year, I guess, because it was about the Emmys and how Patty didn't win, and then some months later in January he responded and agreed.
So he still has a very overloaded email.
Very overloaded email. In the past, it was, we answered questions like one of the things in After Summer Swords, he mailed us and said, which houses have I specified have stars in their heraldry? Because I've decided that those that have a 7-pointed star, that only some of them should have it to show a particular connection to the faith. Because I've come up with, there's going to be this new High Septon showing up, but he's going to revive these old militant orders, and one of them I'm going to call the Stars, and I wanted them to have a connection to that order. So we gave him that list, and that ended up being the High Sparrow and bringing back the order's militant. And then also with A Feast for Crows Onward, he sent us the manuscript, or Random House will send us the manuscript before publication to help find continuity errors, just to be another pair of eyes. But it's become less over time. He has said actually he now uses the wiki of Ice and Fire himself to help refresh his memory. And at one point he had pointed out, you're missing this and that, and the things. And George, you haven't published it. You haven't published it yet. Oh yeah, that's right. I guess that's for Winds of Winter. But some things are happening that will.
So it's good that George didn't have wiki editor access, because then he would have gone in and edited the wiki.
He might have been confused,
and added in things that had yet to be revealed.
Imagine him spoiling the book by accidentally forgetting when he published.
That would have been extremely funny.
Yeah.
So we're not going to give George wiki editor access, because
as to some people want to put forward, there are some people who have been very negative. People claim, the reason this takes so long is Elio and Linda filled George's head with he needs to do more world building. He has never asked us a single thing about the books and process. He's not asked our opinion. He didn't ask us, hey, what do you think of this idea about a High Septon? That the books are his. They are really his work.
And he has had obviously author colleagues that he has had as beta readers, and
who he has more trusted as people who
know crafting a story.
Yes.
We may know Westeros very well,
but we're not novelists.
No. Yeah, we're not novelists. We would need a few, 5-10 published books under our belt for George to consider that, I think. So.
Yes, that's the funny thing. I sometimes people say, Elio and Linda can continue this year. No, if anyone's mad enough to suggest that, we'd say no. We're not novelists. We'll help novelists if George asks someone to finish the series for him.
Or if he decided, I really can't be bothered to do this anymore. I'm just going to publish my notes. So we'd happily help him, edit the notes and put that together. God forbid. I really hope that there anything else gets in the way. But no, we as much as I would, love to write something, when the dogs aren't taking up all my time,
that would be our own thing.
Yes, and we don't have the skills needed for fiction writing on that scale, or
not yet. We'd have to go. I don't know. So basically, we're not involved in the writing. George doesn't ask us anything about
how to write
the plot or the themes of the story. That's all him. we have helped with continuity, with little bits of detail, like when he forgets something. And now, as I said, the wiki is he's probably turning to a wiki mostly for that kind of thing.
Given that the information is there, I mean, originally
had the concordance.
We had the concordance, and we sent it to him as a Word doc, and we sent it to him, to his editor. And I think George has over the year gotten a bit more savvy about, searching things and looking up information that way, or setting all his assistants on the wiki.
I even pointed him to the Search of Ice and Fire website, and he thought that was interesting. He actually,
we know it.
He actually bookmarked it, I think, on his phone. So possibly he's used that.
So technology has made us a bit superfluous in that sense.
But as to the next book, I mean, I will assume that, I mean, George, as I
he has said, the next thing will be the next thing published.
Yeah, so if he revealed, by the way, I actually finished this first and it's going to come out first before the Winds of Winter, I wouldn't be shocked if the next DUNK&EGG came out. But I think he really is focused trying to get the Winds of Winter out, because I think it's enough time to have that monkey on his back. I think.
Yeah, he needs to exchange it for another monkey.
Yeah,
the next
one more monkey. One more monkey.
There is a monkey waiting in the wings.
Son of Kong.
Yeah,
grandson of Kong.
He recently said on his blog that he hopes to write more novellas before the series ends, the TV series ends.
Yeah.
So if he wants to publish The Winds of Winter
within the next 4 years,
and then within the next 4 years.
I mean, I'm saying, I mean, Ryan seems to think 4 years at least more. So the series won't end before then. So, but hopefully George is. The problem is it sometimes it seems to be ever receding, but he writes, he thinks he's getting close, and then he realizes this path I've taken is wrong, and he cuts it back. He's probably written many thousands of pages at this point, and he's thrown away many. He's probably thrown away half of a book, basically.
Yeah.
So
I really wish at some point it would be extremely fascinating
to see like a.
And also, if he gets everything finished, I'd love to have him talk about this process.
Yeah.
I don't think he wants to talk about the process while he's still stuck in it. But if he could finish it and get some distance to it, it would be fascinating to know what has been going on, what the problems have been, and really getting to the bottom of it. There's a lot of factors, I think, that have the TV show, the TV shows, everything around him becoming so much busier, and it's
it certainly has gone, I think, beyond his wildest dreams about how much of a institution he's become, and I mean, he has so many things,
and it's not easy at his age to basically have his whole life and the way he has worked his whole life kind of everything around it upended, and for him to change his style of writing, like people have said, oh, you need to be able to write while you're traveling, you need to plan more and not just be a gardener any longer. That has been his writing style and his way of working for his whole life. He's not going to change that at his age, so he has to make room for being able to do it in the same way still, and it's just everything around has changed and makes it difficult.
Yeah,
there are some things that is difficult for an old dog to learn.
Yeah. I was gonna say that it would be really interesting to read the version he has been writing for years and years, but I guess we already have that. What I mean is, we have the 11 chapters published, but my guess is they're going to be completely different in the official version of The Winds of Winter. So, in a sense, we can see we can already see the process changing. The style changing, whatever is initially it was about The Winds of Winter in that those 11 chapters completely shift into something else. So this is maybe something is interesting to maybe get into in the future if he is willing to talk about it. Yes, as you said.
They're doing the archaeological examination of the growth of really the whole series, since we know that the first proposal for Song of Ice and Fire was radically different from what he then put out. The vast rethinking that he does between Game of Thrones and Clash of Kings. There's a lot of fascinating material there. Maybe not, not as much as Tolkien, but still plenty that would be really fascinating to see.
Yeah, maybe one day we will.
Maybe one day, as it was done with the early books with the Cushing Library drafts.
Yeah.
I hope we can see the drafts of Winter too. Even though, as Kara said, the published chapters are drafts in a sense. So when we get the final version of the Winter, we can see the differences, of course. But first, we need to get the final version of the Winter, of course.
We'll start at that end, and then we'll dig backwards later.
We look forward to it. Like we miss George at the books. Even though we have 5 books, we're gonna get through with our rereads and our podcast. But we can't wait. We can't wait. So that's about it. If you have questions, you can ask us questions. We'll be happy to answer them. Whatever.
I have 2. One is podcast. Really, I see all of you have the same microphone. Oh, you have the same microphone. I'm kind of curious because we have ours is an old little one. I've been thinking of using one. What is that microphone? Because it does sound quite good.
Our microphone is this.
Hyper podcast.
Hyper podcast.
It has a really good quality to it. I quite like it.
We changed it recently. And it's good.
Yeah,
it's good.
Nice.
Very good.
Maybe we should upgrade for the season.
And next question is, how have the various podcasts and the fans and generally greeted House of the Dragon the first season in Italy? Do you feel in general happy, or have you had some of the black versus green and that it's so on, this George writes such an unbalanced conflict, and the blacks are the good guys and the greens are constantly getting beaten, and do you have some of that going on?
Okay, so there's definitely conflict inside the fandom, the Italian fandom as well, and it's gonna be even more chaotic next season. We are seeing something of the start of a war in the fandom as it starts in House of the Dragon. So it's like the bigger Anglo-Saxon community, the English-speaking community, but in smaller scale in Italian, and it's tiring sometimes. It's we've been guests in various YouTube channels in the past, and it's in different levels, in a sense that we read the books. We know what's going to happen, what's happening in the next season, and some of them are just show watchers. So there are challenges in discussing things with people who haven't read the books and people who have read them maybe too many times and have really strong opinions about Alicent must have been older than Rhaenyra because this changes that, and etc., etc. But the thing is, it's an adaptation. We need to adapt to the adaptation as well. So it's gonna be,
and it is a good adaptation of the books. So
I would say that in general, if you move away from the Twitter bubble or those things, in Italy it was well received, I can say. Of course, there are things that are criticized. There are choices that can be considered good or bad, but in general, our followers have appreciated very much the world building, the attention to the heraldry, as we said, to being faithful to the book material and to fill in the material when we don't have it in Fire and Blood with things that resemble the main saga, A Song of Ice and Fire. So I guess it has been well received in general. We were a bit dubious about the series before seeing it, but after I went to the premiere, I came home saying, "Oh my God, guys, it's really good." So we were on board with it from the first episode. So yes,
the best impression of the first episode really helped us change our mind on the season. We were reticent because we were burned bad
with Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones, so we didn't want to be what was bad is bad. I can't really articulate the thought because I don't want to go
the
back.
last seasons of Game of Thrones, so we don't have to talk about it.
Yes, exactly. No.
You should have done what I did and stopped with the picture.
Exactly.
More people should have done that one.
Yeah.
I wasn't able to stop watching because I was too curious to see what they cooked and what they came up to. But yeah, I think you made the right choice to stop watching.
Because you really get bad blood if you keep watching it.
I mean, I saw through various means. I saw the script for the first episode of 60s. I thought I'll look at the script and see if I want to.
Because I had that as I was doing the subtitling.
Yes, and I gotta look at the script before the episode. And I started reading, and it opened.
And then he went off to another room
and I covered
and lay down with a pillow over his head. He had gotten to the point where Eloria murders Doran.
Oh my God!
No,
that kind of
I couldn't go back.
That broke him. That broke him.
I don't know. It's really weird of Dorne in Game of Thrones because I knew from far back from Brian Cogman that they loved Dorne in The Feast of Crows and they wanted to show it. And they Brian gets blamed for figuring out how to do it by sending Jamie and Bronn because their problem was can't introduce all these new characters and not have some point, some central characters there. Okay, but he did it because their bosses, hey, we love Dorne, we want to show Dorne, but like what they loved about Dorne is not what I loved about Dorne at all.
Dorne was treated so bad.
That was such a big misstep from them.
The problem. I'm not going to finish, but you thought you wanted the good girl. Needed something else entirely.
Yeah, to add insult to injury, it was an Italian actress, so
yes.
And add even more insult to injury. That episode won an Emmy for best writing.
Yeah.
The madness of the Emmy.
It should have been disqualified for that line alone. It should have been disqualified from winning anything.
I don't know.
Yeah.
They could send anything.
I guess the most famous line from that episode was you want a good girl, but you need a bad pussy.
Yeah.
And that got best writing.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know. It's a shame. I mean, I understand that at that point they could do no wrong as far as Hollywood was concerned, and people were so amazed by the show continuing and being such an epic. I'm sure there was a better script. Any of the other scripts that season was a better script than that one, I think. But
yeah, I mean, it's the same one that has the incredibly cliched Jamie Marcella scene, like, oh, now he just admitted to her that he's her father.
That's how she
and then Elio looks at me and now she's gonna die. And what happens in the next moment?
That was that's where I wanted my expectations to be subverted. That was the moment to subvert my expectations, not giving me exactly what I feared they were going to do. I don't know. It's a shame. It sounds like Three Body Problem has. Have any of you guys watched that?
Not yet.
Not yet.
But it's in the list of things to watch and things to do.
I have intended to watch it. Like every time I go to Netflix, I kind of hover over it and like. I'll get to it eventually. They have apparently gotten more episodes to finish it, I guess. So good on them. But They have a complete story to work with now, so that might help.
Yes, well, you know, David Benioff has shown that he can ruin complete stories too. I'm never going to forgive him for Troy, so.
Yeah.
Let's not get started about Troy.
No, don't get me started about Troy.
Yeah, we
I mean,
can't.
George and I argued about it in Belfast.
Yes,
He said it's not called the Iliad; it's called Troy. It's its own thing.
Yes, it's still the story of the Iliad,
Yes.
and you don't do that to it.
Well, I mean, what do you guys think of George's post on adaptations and Shogun? Have you seen that? It's not a blog.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That was really a good missile.
Yeah, that was,
I think it was talking about Game of Thrones.
It's really interesting because I did point it out, and I have pointed out before, but George has always been very much. He hates writers trying to improve his work. He wants writers to, if you're going to adapt the book, and try to make it the best version for film that they can make it by being an adaptation of the book and not their own thing. But I like there's that line he put out where we'll tell you the book is a book and the film is a film as if it's something profound, and they make it their own thing. And George has used that line before in defending Game of Thrones, saying the books are the books, the show is the show.
He seems to,
and now he seems to saying, well, that maybe that wasn't such a useful thing to say. It doesn't really change the fact that maybe they did some things. I mean, and he's been open about the fact, like he talked very little to them after the 4th season.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems to me that he had to say that the book is the book and the TV show is the TV show because the TV show was done and he couldn't do anything to it. So he had to accept it. But right now, he looks back and probably he can be more open about what he feels.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's probably true. I think also, I remember when we were at Åland, the Åcon, that's a convention in 2015 that we did that. 2016?
2015 seems
2015,
right.
I think. And he was hanging out with the banners and us, and he was kind of lamenting that people couldn't just enjoy a show as a show.
Yeah.
But that was the point in time where things were still going more or less how he had expected it to go. And I gather that probably in the last season, it didn't go the way he thought it would go in the end. And so I think there are some regrets there about it, and maybe
also the TV show finished and people seeing that as maybe he has a sense that, well, the books and the show, but people are taking the influences from the show, and it is actually affecting how they look at the books as well.
That's true.
There isn't this watertight division between them.
True.
That it will actually affect readers. That it goes both ways. So perhaps as an author, it's difficult to see that. Once he sees the effect of that it isn't as simple as the books are on the shelf and they are untouched. Yes, they are untouched. They are still as he intended them to be, but the readers,
how they perceive them,
yes, it's actually, it changes reader perceptions.
It's like the Lord of the Rings film from Peter Jackson. So many people read the books after, but they have the movies in their head now, and they read things through that filter. So no, I think he probably has a little regret, but not a lot of regret, to be honest. It's given him so much. I mean, he is still friends with David and Dan, I think. Certainly very friendly with them when at the Finland Helsinki World Con in 2017. Still very positive about what they've done and achieved. It's just like maybe some of it went a little in the wrong direction. I think he's happier with. I think there's better working base, I think, in some senses, with Ryan Condal, because he's like a real fan. He's been a fan from before he was a screenwriter, before Game of Thrones existed. And he approaches it as much as possible with that kind of thought, even though he has said there are things that he consults George and everything and all the changes, and sometimes George says, okay, that makes sense, and sometimes George doesn't agree. He said that I don't like that, but he agrees at the end. It's your show in the end. You gotta, if you feel like that's gonna work best, you do it.
And I mean, if you put 10 fans in a room and ask them how they would want to see a certain scene done or how they would want a certain character portrayed, they're going to have different opinions. So
You can't please
There are
everyone.
going to be people who interpret the material in different ways, even as fans. So yeah, you can't please everyone in that regard. There are going to be people who say, well, it'd be really cool if they changed this thing because we didn't get to see enough of this character, or I don't think this character was done as well as it could have been in the books. Yeah, it happens.
I think George said something about this, about being different canon. There's a show canon regarding A House of Dragon, and then there's a book canon in Fire and Blood. And I think it applies also to to Game of Thrones and West and Fire. Yes. I think it was in regard of the dagger and the prophecy dreams of Aegon. Different thing, set in the same universe, but different version of the same story.
Trying to keep them perfectly aligned is kind of like, I mean, I think you referred to it when there was a talk of the Jon Snow series. Now Kit Harington says isn't it going forward. That George had struggled with that one because it's like it's going beyond the story I intend to tell.
Yeah.
How does that fit into the canon of Game of Thrones? Because he still wants some way to connect it to what he intended.
Yeah.
And the Jon Snow series quite clearly was not part of his plans. So when HBO was, I guess, entertaining it, or he didn't want to say no to Kit. I mean, Kit helped bring to life Jon Snow, so I can see the struggle he had. But I think I think it's probably for the best that it's not going forward this time. But I think it's best that they stick to. There's so much material that they can adapt.
Exactly. So much material. So I think this is the end. We have taken so much of your time for the timing. Thank you for having accepted this invitation. We are very, very happy to have had you here. Thank you for all the answers you gave us and more. And we wish you a happy week, and everything that's good for you. And give us an update on the dog.
Yes, please.
We
would really like to know if he's okay. Oh,
maybe you'll be able to rescue the little earbud.
No, I'm not sticking that back in my ear.
I think it would be difficult to rescue the earbud.
Sure.
Anyway.
Thank you
so much for inviting us.
Thank you very much.
It's always a pleasure to have you in Italy.
It's always a pleasure talking to others. It's not that often as we used to be more in the past with and now we need to get back into the mood of it again to do videos for this season. So it's a good warm up to have a good chat about the books and the TV shows and everything.
When you want to come back, we're always eager to have you.
Maybe at after the end of a season, we can kind of see how
this one went.
We're here.
Momentum this season, maybe. That would be great.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Excellent. All right, guys. Have a great evening.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have a great evening.
Hope
Bye.
to see you again.
Bye.
In person.
Bye.
Bye.